Hello and welcome to the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We will, as always, start with a story.
So I was 14 years old and me and my best buddy, Lisa Mate, who I fondly used to call Beanie, and she used to call me Beanie. I know no idea where that came from. We were going out with two lads who were in the year younger. So there's the first bit of drama, because that was like one of those taboo-y type things. So we were going out with younger boys, and I remember it was one summer and my parents were away somewhere. I had an older brother and sister, so we were allowed to be home alone, although I was the youngest. And we made a plan at school this one day. Well, it was hilarious. We decided that we would trick our boyfriends. We'd have them round to my house. We would then engage another friend of ours, Catherine Reiki, and I am naming names because none of these women have got the same names now. They're all married, so they remain anonymous. And Catherine Reiki was tiny and very athletic, and she would be the one that was going to be the trickster. And all will be revealed in a minute with this story. So we had made plans that weekend I'd have the boys round to my house with Beanie, and we would have a lot of fun and laugh and play and whatever. And the dogs, I had 3 dogs, so they were also involved in this whole weekend. And they arrived, and it just so happened that as they arrived, the sky started to go really black, and we began to have a storm. Because, you know, I don't know so much whether we get the storms like this nowadays. I don't remember them today like back then, but we had this big thunderstorm brewing. So imagine we've got the dogs who were all alert because there's a storm on and they're barking and running around. We are then aware that we've left the back door of the house open in order for Catherine Reiki to come over the back fence into the back of the house and go upstairs. Meanwhile, the lads don't know anything about what we've got planned. And the principle of all of this was that we were going to scare them. We were going to tell them that the house was haunted. So they knew no one else was in the house. All of a sudden, banging comes from upstairs. The boys start to look a bit scared. Did you hear that? There was a noise. The dogs are barking. The thunder's rolling. And we know exactly what's going on. But wow, what's that then? We'll go and have a look. So then we start acting a little bit scared, and the boys are now going into macho mode. We'll go up, girls. We'll go and have a look. And as they came out of the lounge door, all of a sudden, at the bottom of the stairs, landed a tarot card. The card of death had fluttered down the stairs as if by magic and landed at the bottom of the stairs. So of course, we're all going along with this. Actually, I think we probably felt quite scared ourselves, even though we knew what was going on. Meanwhile, the boys have gone upstairs. We're scared because we're thinking they're going to find Catherine Reiki. Catherine Reiki has hid in the airing cupboard and buried herself under the towels in the airing cupboard, not to be found. So of course it even gets better that there's nobody up there with all these noises. The boys run back downstairs. We're then aware that we heard another noise of banging down the stairs, and we presume that Catherine Reiki has exited the back of the house, jumped over the fence and gone. But one of the boys is missing. So we don't know when or how, but one of the boys has left the house too. So we're thinking, oh my goodness, this is all backfiring a little bit, because he was obviously so scared he ran. And then after about 15 minutes, there's a knock at our front door. And one of the boys is still there. My boyfriend is missing. And at the front door is our religious education teacher, our RE teacher, Mr. Rowlands, with a Bible in his hand, who was a very religious man, saying in his best North Yorkshire accent, "I understand you've got a ghost. Would you like me to exorcise the house?" I'm not even lying. And we just looked at him horrified, cried and said, "You better come in for a cup of tea. We'll tell you what's been going on." Needless to say, I was no longer girlfriend of said lad. He finished our relationship, as did the other lad. So yes, we had. We can laugh about it now, but actually, we really did. The whole thing backfired on us quite badly.
Jules, that's exceptional.
I was a very naughty young girl.
I love it. I also love that they fell for it. But we will continue to dive into that in a second because it's incredible. But before we do, let's have a proper introduction. So a little note to anybody who is listening for the first time or anyone who has maybe forgotten. My name is Stefano. I run Puck Creations and I am the regular host of this podcast. If the title Storytelling with Puck or the wonderful, hilarious story that you just heard hasn't given it away, this podcast is all about stories. We will share stories, chat about stories, and see how stories fit in with the business world too. Of course, we couldn't do any of that without our wonderful guests. So you've just heard her with the incredibly cheeky story, but that's just one small part of Jules White's unique human proposition. Jules, why don't you tell us about UHP?
I love the way you just beautifully dropped that in there, Stefano. Yes, thank you. It's so lovely to be on your podcast. It really is. And the UHP comes from the fact that I have been selling and in sales for 32 years now, which is quite unbelievable, really. But I was continuously taught that when I sold, it was all about making sure we told people about our USP, our unique selling proposition. And of course, back when I started, there was no internet. So you could tell anybody anything about yourself, Stefano, and they would believe it. You know, I'm number one in the world. And they'd go, oh, I'll buy from you. And of course, it's very different now. So I started my business almost 4 years ago now. We're coming up to my 4th birthday. And I just felt there was something different about this. And that was actually about people. Because the one thing that always remains unique, no matter what happens, is you. There's no other you on the planet. So then I decided that we should really actually call it UHP, so your unique human proposition. And it forms the basis of pretty much everything I do in teaching people to fall in love with sales.
It's a wonderful idea and it's starting to gain a lot of traction. A lot of us are starting to understand better the idea that we're unique. We're the ones who make a difference to the business, whether or not it's you who has your own personal freelance brand or whether or not you're part of a larger business. It's the people within it that make the business work and flow. But what you've done so well and what I love when I see the way that you work with people is you've managed to almost make it an academic idea so that people realize that it's something which we can all learn. We don't have to just have a certain type of personality to be able to sell in this way. It's just about understanding that it's okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it's developed over time? And was there a bing moment or has it been a slow process? What happened?
I think it's such an interesting question. And I think one of the things to say about what you've just said is that a lot of people come and they say, I don't know how I'm unique. And you think, oh my goodness. So when I look at my career and I look at my success in sales, what I've done is drawn that down and I've analysed it. So actually, what did I do different? And I've then come up with all these little things that I knew were the things that made me unique. So things like my language, things like my values, my strengths, my isms is one of my favourites because that's like those little quirky things that just sometimes...
Tell us some of your isms. What are some of your isms?
Well, I think a lot of my isms are probably my language isms. So things like there's no such word as can't. That makes me very memorable. I talk about that. My dad gave me that one. I also then have ta-ta for now, which is a sign off. So I always sign off my emails and my podcast with ta-ta for now. And it's not mine. It's not mine uniquely, but because I use it regularly, it becomes mine. And so it's my ism. And sometimes it might be, I've met people who always wear pink. I've met people who always have certain things that they've got positioned in certain places, but continually and regularly. And those are isms, because those are the things that I remember you for. So that's what an ism really means. And we've all got them. But sometimes it's about, when I work with people, it's about pointing them out to them, making them really obvious. Well, actually, this is what makes you unique. And they go, oh my goodness, yeah, I actually forgot I do that. Or I forgot I wear that color, or that I like this, or I have these great glasses. One of my clients had some new glasses with these fabulous orange frames. Really fabulous, you know. She had a little dark bob hairstyle. And I said, oh my goodness, that's such a great ism, you know. So it's just little things that make you memorable.
The differentiators, right? The things that make you stand out.
Yeah.
It's for us, we work with our clients on exactly this all the time, defining their brand, understanding who they are. Sometimes some of the arguments that come back against this, though, are, well, this is all great. Yeah, you're unique. Who cares? What can you do for me? What's in the product? What benefits does the product have? What's the, back to what you mentioned earlier, the USP? What's the unique selling point of the product? How does this all fit in?
I think one of the biggest problems is how noisy it is out there, Stefano, now. So, you know, we have so many sales coaches, so many copywriters, you know, there's millions probably worldwide. And the fact is that in a USP sense, they could almost be seen to be all offering the same thing.
Which is no longer a USP.
It's no longer the USP. So that's, I think, where that's the additional piece is, yes, of course, you're a copywriter, or of course you're a sales coach, or you may have this methodology, like I have my own methodology. But then there's me added into the mix. And the me bit is the only bit that no one else has got. And I think that's just that little bit that makes the difference, you know, which is why I like to focus on it. But you're right. Of course, people need to understand why they should buy what you've got. But that's then about ideal client. That's on about matching values. That's on about understanding what value means to your client. So that, of course, there's lots of pieces to this. But I believe it starts with that UHP piece.
I was playing devil's advocate for a while there, but I can't do it for much longer because I agree with you too much. But
I'm too good. Look.
You are. You've used your UHP to sell to me. You did very well.
I didn't even realise it, look, Stefano.
It's part of you. It's part of you. But genuinely, it is really important, I think, to understand that it can sound fluffy when we talk to our clients about, well, you need to work out what your values are as a company. You need to work out why it is you're in business. You need to think about your strategy to get to your motivation that gets you up every day. And all of these things matter. They sometimes will respond with, but why does any of this matter? How does it make any difference? But what I think sometimes people don't realize is that most sales these days isn't transactional. Yes, we still have transactional sales, and yes, we still need to understand what the benefits of a particular product or a particular service are, so that if we do have that transaction, we can answer it very quickly. For example, we create content to make people think, feel, and take action. Very quick, summarized, this is what we can do for you. But what truly makes us unique is so much more. What truly makes us unique is the way that I'm interacting with you right now, the conversations that we have, the reason that we both feel the same things about certain areas of life, the jovial personality that some people have versus the authoritarian personality that some people have. Neither is wrong, but they will connect with different audiences in different ways. Yeah. Those are the things that make you different. And what I love is, you work a lot on people's personal UHP, and we work quite a lot with businesses, almost their UHB, but they're defining their brand. We don't call it the UHB, otherwise you'd sue us. But what I love is that it matters just as much for both.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, Stefano, I also work with corporate teams, and it's the same as you've just said. They dovetail. So you've got the personal UHPs that then connect with the business UHP. And then it gets really special, because those two are now coming together. And that starts with you actually employing the right people for your business. So, I mean, we're going way back now into HR territory. But if you do get it right from that very, very first place, you can have this fabulous UHP bubbling in all aspects of your business. And the other thing to add about what we're talking about, I think, is the fact that no matter what anyone wants to tell me, we buy emotionally.
Oh,
and this is just the core thing. When you're taught in that corporate environment, in the automated sales process way, how to sell, like I was for years, you're made into this robotic, anonymous thing in a process. And actually, people say to me, yeah, but buyers in big companies, they don't buy emotionally. They're just and I'm like, you better believe they do buy emotionally, because their bum will get kicked if they don't buy in the right way.
That's it.
What's not emotional about that?
That's it.
We really do need to understand that, we absolutely, as human beings, buy emotionally.
I'm so with you on that. I think part of the challenge is sometimes the word itself, the vocabulary of emotion, almost causes an emotional reaction negatively for some people, because emotion to some people in the context that we're talking about means fluffiness. It means crying constantly. It means an overindulgence of sympathy or empathy. Empathy is a great thing, by the way. But actually, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about emotion. Emotion can be anger. Emotion can be fear. Emotion can be hope. It can be pride. It can be ego. There are a billion different emotions. So to say that somebody doesn't buy emotionally is kind of ridiculous. The question is, which emotion is it that drives someone more? And therefore, how can you tap into that when you are speaking to them and trying to persuade them to buy something off you? That, I think, is what makes the difference, and maybe something which gets misunderstood. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my goodness, I love what you've just said. It's so poignant, and it's so important. The way you've articulated that is brilliant, Stefano. I didn't expect anything less, to be fair. But I think the thing about this is the bit then that we miss is the fact that we can have a human conversation with people. All right. So this is going back again to my sort of methodology piece, where we get frightened of asking certain questions. Stop fearing the questions that you need to ask, because you can't assume how someone's buying emotionally. You can't assume why they're buying. You need to know. Now, you can assume to a point when you do things like an ideal client avatar. Of course you can. You could drill it down to a point. But then beyond that, you still need to have that human conversation. And the more you have a natural conversation and ask the questions you really do want to ask, the more that person goes, oh my goodness, this is refreshing.
Yes.
They really want to know. They're listening. They understand me. Oh, now I think I trust them. Oh, okay, I'll buy from them.
That's exactly it. It's interesting. Very early on, I wrote an article called Pitch Perfect. And the idea of Pitch Perfect was how to approach going into a pitch and trying to persuade someone to buy something off you. I would say maybe 75% of that article was about everything you do before the pitch, which was what you just described, which is asking questions and listening. Those two things, if you don't do them, you will never sell anything.
No, you won't.
Because of the human connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Connection. And there's another word for your emotion, if you like, is that whole connection thing. Because, that's one of my favorite words as well, isn't it? But yeah, it's fascinating. And we are in a sales training environment that I've always experienced in my career, we were just told what questions to ask, not how to ask a question.
Which is a huge difference.
Yeah, there's the difference.
Also, when you ask the right questions in the right way, something which often happens is the response comes in the form of what we're here to talk about today, a story.
Yes.
How do you find stories? What role do stories play in sales?
Oh, a massive role. There's so many different types of stories. Gosh, this could be a big conversation, couldn't it? Just about stories alone. But there's so many types of stories. And I think one of the things about the work I do, and if anybody was thinking about some tips around selling, think about the different types of stories that you have in your collection and how you can tell those stories. So you've got your own personal stories. Never ever think that they're not relevant to your business, because they're beautifully relevant. It's knowing how to bring them back to your business is kind of the skill. And there's people to teach you stuff like that, isn't there, Stefano?
Well, there are a few.
But there's also things like anecdotal stories. There's also things like client stories. There's also stories in the news. There's so many types of stories, which if you really start understanding your story portfolio, let's call it, you can understand where you then can use that in your selling journey, the relationship you're building with this potential client. So stories are massive.
So if I were to ask you, why would I go into a sales pitch, say, and share a story rather than sharing the facts about a particular product or the benefits? Why would I do that?
Well, I've got a great statistic for you, which you'll love. You might have known I might pull this one out of the bag, but the statistic is that 63% of people remember stories and only 5% of people remember statistics. So the fact is that our brains are actually wired to connect much more deeply and naturally to stories. We resonate with stories. We've been told stories since we were children, hopefully, all of us. I know I was very lucky to have had that. And again, emotion. We connect emotion to stories, because suddenly we think, oh gosh, yeah, I did that. Oh, I had that. Oh yes, I remember that. And then all of a sudden you've got this connection that you can't make if I suddenly say, this product's very pretty and 10% of people like the colour that we make it in more than the colour that they make it in. That doesn't connect us in quite the same way. So.
Oh, I don't know what you mean. I think you just sold it to me. But that's it. It's relatability, right? There's a relatability that comes from stories, as you just explained so perfectly. So, based on that, we should probably talk a little bit more about your wonderful story that you started off with. I feel like there are people who could probably relate to each one of the characters in your story.
I'm sure.
Yes, including the RE teacher who came around with a Bible. Probably the RE teacher probably had to do that a few times.
Oh my goodness. Do you know, he was such a wonderful man as well. He was quite a small man, great big ginger beard he had, which came down to almost his belly button. Right. And just that wispy sort of hair that was going thin on top. You can always picture Mr. Rowlands, you're just never going to forget this fabulous image. And he was high energy, he jumped about the classroom, completely passionate about religion, the Bible, and we did things like the ethics side of religion. So, all those really core subjects like abortion and euthanasia and, those really lovely subjects to debate, and he would let us do that in the classroom with the RE hat on. And we had a lot of fun with him, big respect for the man. And he's on my doorstep and I've lied to him. Can you imagine how I felt?
So how did he get to your doorstep? Who was shouting from the rooftops that there was a ghost in your house?
Well, obviously the experiences of all the noises and the tarot cards flying around the house and such led the boys to believe that there probably was a ghost in my house. And I think we secretly wanted to believe there was. It was one of those houses you sort of felt it's got to be haunted, you know. And so Danny was my boyfriend, and he ran. He decided fight or flight. Dale was the other one. He was going to fight, and Danny was flight. So he ran. He also knew that Mr. Rowlands lived close by to where I lived. He knew exactly where he lived. Don't ask me how, but he did. So he literally went and knocked on his door at his house and fetched it. I mean, can you imagine the fear of this boy, Stefano? I'm sure I damaged him for life. And he brought him back, but he didn't come back with him. I think that was enough for him. But he sent Mr. Rowlands to exercise our house.
Wow. Unbelievable. What I love though is there's almost a cheekiness to it, and it's quite funny. And especially looking back on it now, I think it's hilarious. But there's always that step where it feels like, oh, has this gone a little bit too far? But there's also the reaction of the boys. For one of them to kind of run away seems a little bit kind of, really, are you? But at the same time, if you're truly scared, then I guess why wouldn't you? What you said at the end though, so you said that they weren't your boyfriends anymore after that. Did they tell you, or was that it? Was it just never speak again? Did you ever speak to them and talk about
I think it helped that we were in the different years at school, so we didn't have to actually sit in classes together. I think there was just an avoidance actually of each other. And funnily enough, the other boy, Dale, he is now an incredibly good friend of mine, and we are still in touch. But I don't actually know whatever happened to Danny, so I have to say.
Maybe he went down the whole ghost searching route, and maybe he's living with ghosts and discovering haunted houses across the country. You never know.
I just hope I'm not responsible for anything that happened to him later in life.
I'm sure he's fine. And even if he isn't, I don't think one evening in the haunted house is going to cause too many problems. But it's a brilliant story, and what I love is, again, the emotions that I got from it, the laughter, which helped me again. Okay, maybe it's a bit cheating because we know each other, and I think we're already quite strongly connected. But I feel like also people listening to that story will be laughing and will be connecting with it. Some of them will recall times when they had their own version of a haunted house, or the Ouija boards. Everyone remembers the Ouija boards. And all of this suddenly relates. And so they're building there will be lots of people who have never met you, but are currently building a relationship with you through the stories that you're telling here today. And that to me is something behind the power of stories too, is that you can build relationships with people without ever meeting them, which is an incredible thing. And then when you do meet them and you go into that sales process, then suddenly it's warm. You start in a place of warmth. And if you are speaking to somebody completely cold because they haven't had this content, then being able to tell stories is the way to warm up the room very quickly as well. And that warmth, I think, is another key aspect to stories. I know that it doesn't matter what the story is. If I feel something, even if it's anger about the story, not necessarily anger towards the person, there is a deeper connection and a warmer connection with that person. I think that's what makes them so special.
I love everything you've said, and I will never not love stories, and I will never not keep learning about stories as well, because I think that's the other thing. I think we are always learning about how we tell our stories, what stories make an impact, and actually, like I said earlier, how we connect those stories back to our business and who we are. Because I talk about my dad a lot. So you might have been surprised I didn't actually tell a story about Dad at the beginning of this.
It's rare that I don't hear a story about your dad, but I don't mind that. I feel like I know your dad almost as well as you these days.
Well, I think that's a great case in point, really, is that, by me always talking about my dad, I have connected to people, as you quite rightly say, who have never known me before, but they've actually then said, oh my goodness, I lost my dad, or my dad had a sweet shop, or whatever it might be, and they will connect with me, and we will have this most amazing connection purely because we shared that similarity in our stories. It's really wonderful.
Wonderful. That's a great word to pause on as we celebrate being just over halfway through this episode of the Storytelling with Puck podcast. Our wonderful guest, Jules White, has been entertaining us with funny stories and compelling insights into the world of sales. The stories will continue as we work out the best way to slay dragons, and we delve a little deeper into some of the most fundamental moments in Jules' life. Don't forget, we'll have a Puck Creations tale at the end of this episode. It is wonderful. And it's true. I mean, I remember one of the first times we ever started speaking, and you know that I lost my mum at a young age, and we again, that helped to grow the connection, those stories.
Yeah.
But something that I think also connects is the relatability aspect of things like struggle, going through tough times, and then coming out on the other end. And one of the stories, you told some wonderful stories for Storytelling with Puck, and you always have a big fan base whenever we have that week-long initiative. And one of the more recent versions of Storytelling with Puck, this year's version, you told your story of slaying the dragons. Now, I know you told this story a few times, and I know that a few people will have heard it, but I really don't care because it's so maybe you can give us a condensed version of slaying the dragons again.
Yes, slaying the dragons, as in Dragon's Den. So anyone in the UK will probably know what that is. And in America or around the world, it's called Shark Tank, the equivalent. So you pitch your business to these 5 immensely rich dragons. And the really quick story was I had my son on the 1st of January 2005 and adored him. Still do. He's now 16. And I just fell in love with him, and I didn't want to go back to do a proper job. I wanted to just love him and look after him. So consequently, when he was 3 months old, I started a business, because why wouldn't you? And it was a business which was party plan, selling baby products, because nobody else was doing it. Truly madly baby. And then I saw an advert on my computer which said we're looking for applicants for Dragon's Den. So I applied with a 3-month or a 4-month-old business at that point, which was hilarious. And 2 weeks after I applied, I was actually stood on the cross pitching to the dragons. So that's how quickly it all happened. I consequently got offers from Theo Paphitis and Peter Jones, who were bidding against each other to invest in this tiny little business which was hardly off the ground. Again, storytelling could have been the help there, Stefano. And then I went on to build the business to a very successful business over the next 3 years, and didn't do the deal with Peter Jones, who I shook hands with on the programme. Various reasons. The contract was a bit pants, if I can say that on your podcast.
You can. It's perfectly allowable.
I took on another business partner, built the business to £1 million business year 3 with 430 consultants across the UK doing parties, which was wonderful, and inquiries from all over the world to go global. But we hadn't really done the foundational work on the business we should have done. We grew too quickly, no foundations to support it, and a deal that went a bit wrong with the business partner meant that I literally lost everything after 3 years. So the next few years was spent, really my TEDx talk takes over that, if anyone wants to just look that up, because that takes on then the next part of the journey, which was really starting again from nothing. I was bankrupt, lost my marriage, and pretty much lost everything. So started again.
And that is a perfect example, I think, of the roller coaster that lots of us go through. But me just saying lots of us go through a roller coaster, using those exact words, doesn't touch anyone. But your story and explaining the different emotions that you went through, from the high of winning at Dragon's Den, getting an investment of some of the most successful people in the world who said, we love what you do, possibly because of your story. Then having just so we don't get sued, a disagreement on the on what you and the dragons thought a good contract was, and having to go off and do it your own way. But being a new business, not fully understanding how to make everything run, doing some parts exceptionally well and doing some parts not so well, it went wrong. And as you say, then there were lots of personal issues, which again, we can all, I think, relate to.
Yeah.
The idea that we think of ourselves sometimes as business owners, we think of each other as business owners as invincible because business is all you're about, and we forget that all of us have personal lives too, and all of us have big struggles in our personal lives too. But those connections, that's what makes people want to find out more about you. That's what is going to make people go on and listen to your TEDx talk to see what happened next. But what underlines it all for me when I think about your story is, and we would get there at some point today, we always will, is the comment that you always make about your dad. Because he said something which I think that when you were at your lowest ebb was potentially what picked you up and made you be able to go on again. What are those words?
There is no such word as can't.
There is no such word as can't.
Yeah. And that's what he said to me from when I was a little girl, you know, every time. Oh, Dad, I can't do this. There's no such word as can't, you know. Oh, we're never going to be able to do that. There's no such word as can't, you know. And it was just this repetitive thing. And as a teenager, I remember rolling my eyes at him regularly, you know, for goodness sake, Dad.
Of course there's such a word as can't. It's in the dictionary.
But I think as an adult, you know, that never left me. And, you know, one of the things that he said to me in the hospice when I was losing him was, you're going to do great things, you know, because there's no such word as can't. And so that was very cathartic, actually. Some people don't particularly like that word, but for me, it was this realization that a man I thought I could actually never live without, I was going to be okay, you know. And so that was also a big moment. And it was the same phrase, there's no such word as can't.
That's, yeah, that's so powerful. It's interesting how those moments that have the potential to completely break us, and sometimes they do.
Yes.
Sometimes they do completely break us, but can also be what makes us who we are eventually. And I know that even saying it, I listen to myself saying it and I think, God, I am one big cliche. But I think the story that you told and the stories that lots of us have and the stories that lots of us listen to prove the point. They prove the fact that it's a cliche for a reason, because actually there's a truth underneath it. Now, we've been talking a lot about how our stories connect us. And I love the idea earlier of connecting through the comedy of the earlier story and almost the tragedy of this story, but also then the hope that comes off the back of it. And we talked about all of the different emotions that we can have too. Sometimes people talk about sharing your personal story, which we both talked about a lot here. And they talk about almost a formulaic hero's journey. I personally have a struggle with the idea of constantly going on about the hero's journey. My reason for this is I feel like it puts people into a position where they think, I don't have any kind of hero's journey. Do I have to make something up? Do I have to come up with some ridiculous idea of when I hit rock bottom and then came to the top, or saw somebody else hit rock bottom and I was able to bring them to the top and now I'm the hero? Or do I make the customer the hero? What's all this about? And it can be really, really confusing for people and also disheartening, I think, sometimes for people.
Yeah.
What I think I love about stories is that it doesn't have to be this copy and paste hero's journey. Whatever story you tell can connect in some way. What are your thoughts around that? You've spoken earlier already about just being you. Can you maybe dig in a bit deeper to it?
Yeah, oh gosh, it's and I want to articulate this in the right way. I might use a story to do it.
It's always the best way.
You knew I'd do that, don't you? I think it's about, yes, it's definitely about being you. And it goes back to almost sales scripts, doesn't it? You know, the more you try and script something, the more you stop being you, the more you take your eye off the focus of actually just genuinely letting that subconscious stuff come through to being in this conscious place where you've got to say this, or follow this journey, as you say, the hero's journey. So it's like a sales script in some way, but there's an example of a client I had where I was working with him on his stories, and I said, right, bring me a story. He'd written down lots of his story. Bring me a story and I'll show you how you connect it to your business, right? And it was really quite, well, an amazingly powerful story, very tragic, about a guy who, this client had moved around schools a lot when he was younger. So he never settled, continually bullied, you know, quite a typical story I've heard from lots of people. This guy, when he got to this one town, was really wonderful to him, welcomed him, made friends with him, supported and protected him. Later on in life, he found out this guy had committed suicide. Right? So it was a real kind of story. And he went on to talk about the funeral and, you know, how he went to the funeral and he met the family again and everything else. And, you know, how devastating it was to him that this guy who had been so kind to him, had lost his life in this way, but actually the impact it had had on this client about being kind, right? Mm-hmm. That's the story. So then I said to him, he said, I don't know how you're going to connect that to my business like this. So I said, right. So he does things like, it's block management. So he manages apartments and flats, decorative, electrical, all that kind of work. He's a builder. So I said, when you go to the apartments, which aren't owned by the tenants, they're owned, you know, but they live there. What do you do? What did you tell me that you do? He said, I always say hello to them all. I ask them how they are. I ask them about the work I'm doing, ask them what their expectations are. I said, okay, you're very kind, aren't you? He said, yes, I am. It's just second nature. I said, oh, interesting, isn't it? I think that might connect to your story and your experience of that man who was so kind to you in the past. And that was just a really small example of such an obscure story and how it connects to his values now in his business of kindness.
I think it's firstly shows off why you're great at what you do, because you are able to make those connections, and that's not always easy to see. But it also shows the importance of what we started talking about at the very beginning, which is understanding yourself. If you can understand truly what your values are, and you can understand truly what really motivates you, because we don't think about this on a daily basis. No. Why would we? We just get up in the morning and do what we've got to do. But when you think about what actually gets you up in the morning, why you care about the work that you do, what it is that makes you want to keep on trying even when the chips are against you. You are working out who you are first before you then try and work out who you're trying to impress. Because actually your story is going to be the thing that connects you to certain people, and it's also going to be the thing that puts lots of people off. Because there will be people who don't connect with your story or who actually find it in some way annoying or strange. But if you try and tell someone else's story, or you try to explain yourself in a way that is the middle ground that you think that everyone else is doing, then actually you're not going to impress or scare off anyone, but you're just going to be ignored.
Yes, you'll be the same. You'll be the same as everyone else.
Which some people, I understand, would like to be the same as everyone else and just fit in, etc. And I understand that, and I have no qualms with that if that's what people would like to do. But when you're running a business, actually, if you're the same as everyone else, your business probably isn't going to last for very long.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think, you know, the point you've made comes back to the fact that not everyone will buy from you, and that is okay. because you do not want everybody to buy from you. You want the right people to buy from you and make clients for life. And that's special.
That is special. And talking of special, there will be lots of people who will be desperate now to work out where they can find your special talents so that they can be supported to understand their own unique human proposition and to understand how they can connect on a deeper level with their potential clients. So where can our audience find you?
So live it, love it, sell it is really the thing to remember, because that's my web address with a .co.uk on the end. And then if you look me up, the big place I hang out really is LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So again, you can either look up Jules White or you could put in live it, love it, sell it, and you would find me. So I am relatively easy to find with the live it, love it, sell it brand.
Perfect. And on that note, I will make sure that I link all of that in the show notes so that it is easy to find you.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
So before we leave you all to your breakfast, lunch, dinner, cups of tea, whatever it is you're off to do next, we will do what we do at the end of every Storytelling with Puck episode and read a story by Puck Creations. Dear Mum, where to start? You are the greatest teacher I know. Occasionally, you would teach me with words, but your greatest lessons came from your actions, the way you lived your life. You showed everybody kindness. Nobody could ever waste your time because you made time. You made space. You made everybody feel like they were the most important person in the world when they were in your company. You showed us all love. You knew it was so much more powerful than hate. You held us when we needed to be held. You kissed your family goodnight. Every night. You showed a fiery passion for your beliefs. You would stand up and be counted. Everybody knew what you valued, but you were also so willing to listen, to empathise, to change your mind if you felt that you were wrong. Although you were rarely wrong. Even when I thought you were wrong, you gave me the time to realise that. You were taken too soon, but you are never gone. I miss you, but I know you're still here. Inside. You keep me strong when I feel at my weakest. You're the best of me. And you fight the worst of me. Thank you. I love you. You've just been listening to the Storytelling with Puck podcast. We'll be back very soon, so make sure you subscribe and catch up on any of the episodes you've missed.